So, in light of fallout from Duckstation, there are some places that are looking at how to package Duckstation in the best way possible, and Nix packages is no exception. So, Nix packages, for those that use NixOS, basically provides a way of installing packages easily through a pre-built singular config file, basically, and you go from there. So the issue we run into a little bit, my mouse is being weird again, but anyway. So the issue description, they're basically talking about that like Duckstation is no longer an open source project as of this commit right here. They only permit unmodified distribution based on the README as of that commit. Let's see. It needs to be a discussion, not a direct fix at the moment. Old versions remain under GPLv3 and there are already forks showing up. It isn't clear what's a good next step, so pinging maintainers for the package for Duckstation to get the discussion rolling. Anderson does bring up a point. Does it apply to scripts? So Nix, I believe, largely relies on scripts for compiling and putting together packages. I would imagine if you're following the setup based on Duckstation's README, which is right here, there are compilation instructions in the README still on the repo. For some reason, my stuff is not being happy with me. I don't know, Chromium's being really weird right now. But it is pushed by Flatpak and app image. If I can get down to it. Anytime now. Okay. Let's see. Flatpak, app image, Mac OS. This is really bothersome. Okay, so you've got your downloading instructions running. There should be build instructions in here. I was just looking at them. Okay, so here we are at the build instructions, finally. So we make sure we have these certain packages installed. And that should be pretty easy with Nix, I would think. And then you are going through cloning the repository, building the dependencies, then running cmake as so, compiling the source code, and then you can run the binary. So I would imagine under this auspice, you could script all that out pretty easily, honestly. As long as you're not stripping out any of the copyright stuff. So then the question is posed here after, does it apply to scripts? Legally, probably not, because you can follow those directions in a script pretty easily. It's not hard. They're literally like a list of commands, and that's all a script is running a list of commands, one after the other. Given the history of the project and the author's pretty anti-packaging stance, or does Nix Packages trust that this is sufficient to avoid any issues? So what I wonder is this anti-packaging stance that's talked about. I believe author's petty anti-packaging stance. I wonder where that actually comes from. I mentioned in the last video about Duckstation about sometimes you get these packagers that package up an application weird and it breaks the package. And that's where you run into issues of people being anti-packager and saying you can only do it this way, and this way. I'm sure OBS, a very popular video recording software that I'm currently using, has run into the same package, which is why the Flatpak is the official way to get it. Because of these packaging issues and these petty anti-packaging stances that pop up because different distros package their stuff differently and end up sometimes breaking things, and thus the user blames the upstream developer rather than the package maintainer in a lot of cases, because it's like, OBS. Obviously, I need to go look at this rather than my distro be like, hey, I've got this problem with this software that you packaged. So, would this commit be affected by this? Was created to have something working on Darwin. Project cannot be compiled from source there. Gets copied directly without modification. Disclaimer. There's been no such license change. You cannot change the license of other people's code without their explicit consent or revoke the GPL on your own. He got permission to change the code from people. He talked to other contributors, got permission, or changed code where needed, okay? The only thing the author can do is dual license their own parts of the code, but they must still obey the GPL for any new code until they actually relicense their project by either getting all other past contributors to consent to relicensing or removing their code, which he has stated he has done. The code, therefore, remains GPL, and the primary author is in violation of it due to their relicensing attempt 2 weeks ago. Any code newer than this is in violation of the GPL. Since they're in violation, we'd be in violation too if we shipped their code. There's no legal way to ship the relicensed Duckstation, I'm afraid. Again, this is an issue of we haven't dug into any background on what has happened behind the scenes in channels we can't see, so we're just going to say he didn't ask anybody about relicensing code, or talk to them, or remove their code. Our current options are to either remove the package, which isn't too far-fetched, as upstream is clearly malicious actor, or to ship the last version, not in violation of the GPL v3. I'd favor the latter, as there will surely be a new upstream or massive backpedal of the current upstream in the coming weeks. So, blaming the developer as a malicious actor when multiple packagers do stuff and then just pass it off as go talk to the upstream developer is actually kind of malicious in your own right. If you're accusing someone of being malicious because they are doing something and you don't have the full background or are not following their every step to make sure that they're not doing everything that you're accusing them of not doing, then maybe you're the malicious one at the end of the day. It comes down to, can you understand why they would be the way that they are? Have they had a past experience with dumb distros packaging things poorly, and then users coming and blaming this developer for something that a package maintainer did, rather than doing it going through the proper channels going upstream as you go. According to him, this has allegedly been done. I posted this issue under the good faith assumption that this comment is accurate. Either way, it doesn't actually change the discussion more than simply adding a "this might all be resolved before any decision is made" outcome, though that too remained an option given it's possible the author simply undoes everything due to pressure. I would guess that assuming that outcome is unproductive, even if the final decision ends up being do nothing, the only way this becomes an important factor is if a previous contributor comes forward and actually asserts that they did not authorize this and that this isn't really in the scope of Nix packages. Unless someone here also contributed to Duckstation, I haven't taken the time to cross-reference every contributor. Again, this is a good faith move, not flat out accusing them of not having talked to all past contributors to gain consent of relicensing. Okay? So, and then this is also the, hey, we have to plan for this in case it does happen. Not planning for it and saying, well, due to pressure, they will obviously lapse. Which, more likely than not, when we see projects like this that go through things like this, the developer ends up just completely dropping the ball and saying, I'm not doing this anymore, which kills a project because some idiot had a broomstick shoved so far up their butt they couldn't pull it out. And so you end up losing things that people enjoy because of other people that, if it comes up, basically do things like this. Right, like flat out. Honestly. And I mean that may be a little bit blunt, but it's people like that that end up like killing really fun things for a lot of people. Because they end up pressuring developers so much that they just drop the ball. Rather than, oh, I'm just going to relicense and deal with the issues that come along with it. It's easier to not deal with the issues, completely drop the project and your hobby, than to deal with idiots like that. Okay, entirely depends on if the author argues that the scripting step qualifies as packaging. If so, then probably. Either way, it boils down to if it makes sense to find an alternative, deal with this as it approaches, or simply move on. Should probably add that probably it won't, since that PR is based on a prior version to the license change, but it would throw updates into doubt. So, if you go back, it should be prior to any code changes that took place before relicensing. So, you would have all that code that would be under that license at that commit, is basically what the auspice is here. Which makes a lot of sense to me. So you work under the auspices of that license, which a lot of people seem to be doing with their forks, is they're forking at this certain point in time and saying, okay, we're going to update all these things so that we're kind of up to snuff with it, but we're not completely like dropping everybody off the ball and starting from like all the way back here, like 2 weeks ago as of now. What an unfortunate situation. Relicensing doesn't affect old versions, as FOSS licenses are irrevocable by design. Even contributors that agreed to relicense their contributions under the new license cannot revoke their previous grant to us, so we can package a current version indefinitely. I think that continuing to include packaging expressions for future versions of Duckstation should not in itself be a license violation, since they are not by themselves derivative works of Duckstation, so long as we have the license set appropriately to ensure that Hydra does not create any derivative works itself. On the other hand, we would essentially be providing code that can only be used by infringing copyright. There's a precedent for that, though, like the options in the FFmpeg package, it allows you to combine incompatibly licensed dependencies. So this comes down to, there are options to building Duckstation, as we noted in the official repo. There are instructions for building. I would go off of that for directions on how to build your packages, honestly. So the maintainer is also correct that NixOS and many other distributions technically violate the GPL on a mass scale by not clearly marking our derivative works and reproducing the copyright and license notices with all derivative works, though the latter is something other distros do better than us. So if Upstream is explicit about license lawyering this, we should probably not be carrying the current version marked as free either. What is the most recent FOSS license commit of Duckstation? In terms of forks, libretro has SwanStation. Is this a problem for the Git repo? Technically, the repo provides scripts to modify code. The Hydra caches are more of a useful add-on. Let's try and scroll down here. What is the most recent FOSS license commit of Duckstation? Anything before including this Duckstation commit here. Is this a problem for the Git repo? Emily meant that in order to comply with the GPL, we technically must prominently state that we modified the license code because building a binary counts as a derivative work in the current Western copyright system, and the GPL requires all derivative works to carry prominent notices of modification. We actually do this in many cases where the project provides a convenient method, such as core utils, with packager, config flag, or other kernels, but by far not in every package. So if there are hooks, it makes it easier. So derivative work must retain the copyright warranty notice of the GPL text, and we don't currently copy license files. This is a thing I mentioned earlier too, is the whole thing of copying the license file. That becomes an issue because a lot of license files have the stipulation. You have to distribute the files with this license. And when you strip that license file and other things like that, then it becomes an issue. This is something I'd like to work on, preferably with as much automation as possible, but obviously it's pretty thankless work, and we rely on general FOSS community goodwill as package distribution. I don't think it's a problem for the Nix expressions, although it's possible that a court could look at shipping software that can only be used by violating other people's copyright. So at least in the case of Duckstation, I'd be wary given the maintainer's established stance on packaging violating GPL. I think our patches is derivative work, so the upstream projects that we don't MIT license may be a source of chronic license violation, though. Again, the open floss community still has their problems with license violation across the board. That's what we're seeing right here. What about software like Aegis Sub that are BSD but link with GPL libs? I would suggest something like a pass-through that installs licenses in a dedicated directory, say Nix store licenses, to not affect the current Nix store. I never asked, but how GUIX deals with this? So again, this is an issue of like, oh wait, we don't distribute the licenses with it. And if you have like a directory for each like software package and then their licenses that go with it, then it makes it easier, because even many corporate companies do have the licenses with their software that they're distributing. If it's a derivative work, it needs to be licensed under GPL's terms. Most BSD licenses are GPL compatible, though, so that's usually trivially possible, but if I recall correctly, there was a weird BSD license variant that was incompatible. Whether linking is a derivative work is a hotly debated topic, and currently unclear, but there are good indications that it is, and that's been how the GPL has been commonly interpreted to point to where that may even be a consideration for court deciding on this. I don't see why that'd be necessary. Packages usually install their license into their shared directory. A bunch of our packages already do this by default, no action required. So in Nix, they are distributing they are packaging the licenses with it. Would the same solution used for ASprite work here as well? As I understand it, ASprite is source available, but not redistributable. The package is built from source as still Nix packages, but is set so that it must be run locally. In a sense, it just amounts to distributing an easy-to-use script to create your own personal build, so it's not really so it isn't really modification. My concern is with the global, not merely mass rebuild. To begin with, each possible source should have its meta license clearly set. After that, we need to calculate the interactions among the inputs, all of them possibly expanding to all derivation machinery. Let's see. We can establish a course of action in order to generate a global rebuild, not flooding the already established Nix store. I'm thinking in something like inputs and add a pass-through. We do global rebuilds every staging cycle, and separate outputs wouldn't prevent it. So basically, they've got a system that they could run it through. So I just had a thought about this. So ASprite, apparently they've got a thing with this, which is basically what I'm saying. You basically distribute a script that runs all of this, makes sure this is installed, and then goes through these steps to build the package locally. And then you're not redistributing the package. It's like the AUR. You're not redistributing the package. You are downloading a script. You are building the package locally and installing it that way. So when there's an update, it goes through, downloads it, and does it from there. Nix could pull something like that, I think, technically. Gentoo does something very similar. You download a build script, and then it builds right there on your system. The other option is, because they're binary distributions, you have the option of running a binary distribution. If I can go and scroll all the way up. Come on, buddy. You can do it. I believe in you. Maybe I've had OBS open too long. I don't know. Latest rolling release. Should be able to find it here somewhere. So yeah, you can see we've got a Mac release in a zip. We've got a Windows release in a zip. We've got our our Linux release in an app image. We've got our Flatpak right there. So you do have options, and I've seen people extract app image stuff. There are AUR scripts that do this, so it wouldn't be too far from the pale to be able to do that in the context of Nix or any other packager. You've got precompiled binaries, you make sure that the environment is set right, and you're good to go. Valve does this as well with Pressure Vessel for old games. Valve, between Proton and Pressure Vessel, you've got a system that provides a common environment that developers can use and that doesn't need to change. You designate your Pressure Vessel version, and then you can run your game in that context. That's what App Image and Flatpak are doing, is providing that common build environment and creating less issues for developers because they can define their environment. This whole issue of having to repackage and going through the discussion of the relicensing becomes less of one when you start to look at things like, okay, they provide build instructions here, so technically we can still build it. It's just they're probably not expected to provide support for it at that point. It's not an app image or a Flatpak. If you liked the content, if you enjoyed it, if you think I deserve it, like, comment, subscribe, leave any criticisms you have or what have you. I appreciate it. Feed that algorithm, like I said, and I will see you guys in the next one.